Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Meteorologist Nick Stewart. We got a bit of a ice storm developing across the upper Midwest. Now, I don't want to say a rare event, but these are rather tricky events. And the thing with ice storms is that, unlike snow, where you can kind of drive through, a few inches of snow, you really can't do a lot with ice storms. Ice is just, no matter what, it's a problem, and it causes all sorts of issues. For travel, becomes hazardous, if not impossible. We have power outages, we have tree damage, things like that. Ice storms are just overall a not very good thing. So we're going to talk about that tonight. You can already see that we are dealing with the severe weather, not severe weather, but winter weather developing right now across the area. Why is that might have incorrectly happened? Hold on, stand by. Anyway, we got the ice you can already see kind of developing out there across portions of western Iowa, the Omaha metropolitan area, over towards western Iowa, just west of Des Moines. You can already see that roads are a bit slick. You can see ice is already kind of developing. This is one of those traffic cameras over towards the Council Bluffs area, Council Bluffs in Omaha. You can already see the ice is accumulating there on the lens, kind of a sign that we're already dealing with issues. Here's a look at, you can see I-80. Traffic is moving along fine, which is good. Just keep that in mind. Also, did my Facebook just do the wrong caption? I think it did. I think my Facebook, I'm trying to fix something and I've been having a lot of issues. I think my Facebook says severe weather, which is not correct. Yeah, trying to watch in the mornings. Yeah, I don't know why it did that. Hold on, let me just finish this while I'm doing this. Anyway, you can kind of see what's developing right now across the upper Midwest. Let me edit this post. Let me change this caption. Select all. And we'll replace that with that. Maybe that'll be fixed. I don't know. Either way, you can see the roads are pretty slick across the area. Let's talk about other things now. Let's just gradually move on to a different topic. So here's what it looks like on the high-resolution rapid refresh model. We are tracking that severe weather as that wintry weather as a kind of a move through the Midwest tonight. Already seen that wintry weather out that way. That purple that you can see there, that is, again, the wintry weather. That is that freezing rain. And you can see it overspreads much of Iowa. Up here at 11 o'clock. Here we are at midnight. Now we're starting to see the very kind of far eastern edge pushing towards the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City metro areas. Maybe a bit of time before this reaches the ground due to a little bit of a dry air pocket, but I don't think it will take too long before you even start seeing freezing drizzle. So that's just an indication of it doesn't take a lot to cause a lot of issues. We'll keep stepping forward. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. I think for much of eastern Iowa, around 4 a.m., I think is when things really start to get slick in eastern Iowa. That will continue towards sunrise. Here we are about 6 a.m., 7 a.m. And what you can really see are the darker purples, right? The darker purples, that is your sign that we're dealing with even more issues, right? We're seeing even more problems with the heavier precipitation. Part of the issue with this event is that we're going to see that buildup in ice pretty quickly because the actual intensity of the precipitation will be rather heavy. Here's a look again out by Council Bluffs. You can see the plows are already in action. They are doing their thing. The plows are doing their things, which is very good. And they're trying to kind of get that pre-treatment right. The problem with freezing rain, too, is you can kind of get that pre-treatment down, but it can kind of wash away. So pre-treating these things can be a bit of a difficulty. We'll keep stepping forward because part of the issue is that this event will actually be a bit of a long-lasting event. We're going to be sticking around with the freezing rain as we go throughout the night, tonight, and into tomorrow as well. So again, 7 a.m. here, we'll go 8, 9, 10, 11. Around noon is when I do believe we will start seeing that flip from freezing precipitation to wintry precipitation to just all rain. But it's going to take some time for all that precipitation to kind of shift over into rain from the wintry precipitation, right? It's going to take some time for that to happen. But once we get into mid to late afternoon, let's say 3, 4 o'clock, that's when I do think we'll finally start seeing mainly rain as opposed to freezing precipitation, right? So that's when things kind of get more problematic. So that's what it looks like in terms of the timeline. I do want to show some of the probabilities here. So this is the probability of at least a tenth of an inch of ice. Let me, oh, hold on. Let me try this. There we go. Probability of at least a tenth of an inch of ice. So when you start talking about a tenth of an inch of ice, that is enough to cause pretty significant issues to the roadways. That makes travel very difficult to travel on, if not impossible to travel on. And this is also when you can start introducing some potential for power outages. When you look at the probability of at least a tenth of an inch of ice, there's a pretty good pocket here in east central Iowa, greater than 90%. There's in fact a 95% pocket here in this area along Interstate 80 that includes Grinnell, Newton is kind of in that area as well right here, over towards kind of Williamsburg. Kind of this pocket is where I do think we'll see some heavier icing accumulation, and that could push all the way towards Cedar Rapids, Iowa City. I mean, you're still sitting in that 80 to 90% chance of at least a tenth of an inch of ice. That's pretty certain. If we up that to a quarter of an inch of ice, you can see the probabilities do drop off 30 to 40%, but that's still relatively speaking high for a quarter of an inch of ice. And that does include Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, and out west towards like Williamsburg, towards maybe not quite to Newton or Grinnell, but still relatively high. Marengo's in there as well. Much of Benton County, so Vinton, all that. So that's kind of some of the areas that we will likely see the heaviest of the precipitation. A half an inch of ice, that ain't happening. So that's good news. But again, quarter of an inch, I do think is definitely a possibility in that ice storm warning. Tracy asking, what time do you think it will be in central Iowa? You're in the ice storm warning. Let's go back real quick. We'll kind of time it out here. So here we are. We'll start at midnight tonight. You can already see it's in portions of central Iowa. This is kind of a broken website, unfortunately. But you can see here we are again at midnight, already pushing it towards like Des Moines, over towards Williamsburg, Newton area, towards Grinnell. I think the heaviest precipitation will really start ramping up, probably closer to 4, 5, 6 a.m., especially for central and eastern Iowa. Not to exclude our friends in northeast Missouri, you might not get a lot of that freezing precipitation, a lot of that freezing rain, but it doesn't take a lot to really cause a lot of issues. I'll go back, for example, out towards the Omaha metro area. There's not a lot of precipitation that's already fallen, maybe a glaze at best, and we're already seeing issues. In fact, Interstate 80, I-80 eastbound is closed because of a crash. That's 880. That's between kind of that stretch. Let me actually pull up the map here. That's between that stretch here between Loveland and where kind of 80 drops down to Omaha. That stretch of 880 is already closed eastbound due to a crash there. Kind of pulling up some of the DOT cameras. These are some of the snowplow cams. You kind of see some of the light glazing maybe on the windshields. There's not a lot yet in camera range to show you, other than, again, this camera here. To kind of, it doesn't show a lot, but it kind of says the whole story. You can see that ice accumulation on the elevated surfaces. So we're already seeing those issues on the bridges. We're likely already seeing this on elevated platforms. We're seeing this maybe on power lines and tree branches already. We're not going to see a lot over towards the Omaha metro area, but it will be enough to at least cause some slick roads. The bigger issues, again, will develop overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, especially eastern Iowa. Eastern Iowa looks to be kind of the epicenter for this. I'll kind of show again the probabilities of at least a tenth of an inch of ice. And you can see Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Williamsburg. We're talking over towards Vinton, Marshalltown, Grinnell. This area, you're talking 80 to 90+% chance of at least a tenth of an inch of ice. And that looks pretty dicey. Mike, you're asking a great question. It's exactly where I was going next. So there's a little bit of good news with this event. The icing, of course, is a problem. Travel is always downright difficult when you're talking about the probability of ice. Any ice accumulation is a problem. Now, the real issues begin to mount when you start adding on to the winds. When you start adding winds to the ice threat, that starts allowing the power lines that have some heavier weight to them start swaying more in the wind. That's really when you start seeing more power outages. Same with tree branches. When you start adding on the wind, that's when the tree branches are more susceptible to damage. The good news here is that the winds are not forecast to be particularly strong during this event. These kind of light blues that you're seeing here, not too high, around 10 to 12 knots, let's say maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour. If we look at the gusts, so those periodic gusts that could develop, it's a little on the higher side. We could see some gusts approach maybe 30 miles per hour, maybe 35 miles per hour. That could be enough to start causing more issues with power outages and tree damage, because again, the combination of the ice, which you can already see accumulating, with the wind that's expected to develop, that will lead to more issues. Again, the power lines swaying with the extra weight, that's how you get power outages, as well as the tree branches getting that extra weight, falling down with the extra weight, with kind of being a little bit more, shall we say, weakened by the strong winds, right? So the combination of the ice and the wind, that is always a problem, and we could see that across the Midwest tomorrow. Thankfully, we're not talking really powerful winds, but I still think, you're talking 35 mile per hour wind gusts. That is enough to cause issues. It could be worse, but it certainly could be a lot better. So that's going to be the main story tomorrow. I do think there will be power outages, potentially prolonged power outages, because like when you're talking that kind of icing, it's very difficult to respond to that as an entity, like an Amarin or an Alliant. It's very difficult to actually respond to that. If we look at I'm trying to find it. I had it earlier. I'm trying to find it here. The total precipitation. Is there no ice accumulation? Where did my ice accumulation product go? All right, we'll just do precipitation for now. I'll have to find it on another website. We'll assume, for example, that much of this kind of along north of I-80, if that's all ice, that's obviously a problem. It won't be all ice right away. There'll probably be some mixing early before we go into straight freezing rain. We can see some models here are indicating upwards of 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch of liquid precipitation. And you got to factor that at least some of that, probably most of that, will be in the freezing rain variety. So again, let me pull up on a different site. Let me do this behind the scenes here. In terms of the ice accumulation, what some of the models are showing. Go to the HER. Let's do winter weather. We'll do freezing rain. There we go. So I think this personally is a bit on the high end, but this is what models are showing. Some models are indicating, 3/10 of an inch of ice. This number here is definitely inflated. Down here in southern Iowa and northeast Missouri, you're not getting an inch of rain. That freezing rain, that ain't gonna happen. This is the HER not handling that the changeover very well. This will not be this. It will not be this high. But if you look at this pocket here on Interstate 80, kind of east central and central Iowa, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for 1/4 of an inch of icing kind of in this area. Again, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, about as far east as the heaviest of that amount will go. But if you're over towards like Tipton, certainly a possibility maybe up to 1/4 of an inch. But that's kind of what we're looking at that area. I don't like how that looks. That looks a little high end for me. I don't think that's going to verify like that. Let me look at another model. Let's go to the damn 3K is coming in. This usually is a little, yeah, that's a little higher end too. It's a little bit more in line, not quite 1 inch plus down here. That again, that ain't gonna happen. But you can see maybe 3/10 of an inch at worst is a chance there in eastern Iowa, and I think this also pushes it too far east. But with all that said, that is something that we're definitely be watching with time. Any other questions you guys may have, I'm happy to kind of answer them with going through this. Again, I can kind of show the simulated radar to kind of time things out again. We got the brand new run coming in right now, kind of pushing towards Des Moines metro area, probably sometime around 11 p.m. to midnight is when you'll start getting more steadier precipitation. And the stuff really begins to kick in again overnight tonight, primarily after maybe 4 to 5 a.m. That's when we'll really start seeing the heavier precipitation begin to fall, that heavier freezing rain, and that will continue throughout the morning hours, the early afternoon as well. So kind of a long duration. So if you're in that ice storm area, again, plan on needing to stick around for a while, right? The roads aren't just going to clear themselves very quickly. You're really going to need to keep an eye on the road conditions and all of that. I really just wouldn't travel tomorrow, period. That's just big problems, right? You really can't do much with ice on the roadways. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to drive with ice. I'll go ahead and show the alerts real quick so everybody's kind of on the same page. Again, here we are. Here's that the ice storm warning. That is, again, kind of in that darker purple, not quite magenta. I don't really know what the proper color is that. I think purple is probably just a good way to call it. A deep purple, maybe a royal purple. That's where that ice storm warning is. Again, that's where we do expect the heaviest of that icing to occur, maybe 1/4 of an inch in that area. That, again, does include Cedar Rapids, Iowa City. It is technically to the east of the Des Moines metro area, but you are in that winter weather advisory, which extends well outside of that, because the whole region is going to be seeing problems with this event. But this is just where the heaviest of the ice will be. That, again, is where we could be potentially talking about icing accumulation of 1/4 of an inch. Thinking on Jackson and Clinton counties being added, I don't think, Brett, that we will see that vastly extend unless there's really some significant changes to the forecast. Models overall are in pretty good agreement that the worst of that icing should be just to the west, but either way, you are in that winter weather advisory, so either way, the roads will be hazardous. Again, going back to the DOT, for example, there we go. We're not expecting a lot of ice out here, but you can already see a lot of the blue. That's the indication that the roads are already at least slick. There's already maybe some partial icing occurring on some of these roadways. And there are a few crashes already. We got a left lane blocked due to a crash south of Omaha on I-29. Again, that 880 is closed eastbound between I-29 and where I-80 splits there. That's closed eastbound. That's probably what by... There's not much there, I know. BB Town. So that is, if you're going eastbound, God, that's a rough spot for it to occur. There's not a lot of exits either. Thankfully, there's that rest stop, I believe, right there. But yeah, there's like no exits in that stretch. That's a rough spot to be stuck on. Yeah, so any other questions? Happy to answer anything you guys got. Morning Dew asks, how does the I-80 look for travel next week? So... we should see a warm-up. That's some good news. There will be some improvement. The icing shouldn't stick around for too long. I don't think the icing will be a continued threat, into Sunday. There might be impacts from the icing, like power outages and things like that. But I don't think we're going to be dealing with, a significant issue persisting too long, especially on the roadways. Because you're asking specifically I-80. The roadways should definitely improve. One thing I do also want to show real quick is that the reason that this is a bit of an issue is that we're dealing with a decent amount of precipitation. Now, when you look at the where we are historically in terms of moisture levels for this event tomorrow, we're talking, we're in 2%, in the 2 standard deviations above normal in terms of moisture content. So that just shows you just how much moisture there is to work with. There's quite a lot, precipitable water values pushing 1/2 inch. That's pretty high end. And when you talk about, how much moisture is actually moving into the region. So this is like a look at the water vapor transport. So the moisture transporting its way into the region. That's also, you're talking 3 to 4 standard deviations above normal. When you look at like percentiles, that's always kind of a fun one to look at. Let me try this. You're talking by, midday tomorrow, you're in like the 90th to 97.5 percentile, which means, the chances of that happening are so slim. And so that just kind of goes to show just how much moisture will be in play for the system tomorrow. Stephanie, Cedar Rapids going to be bad. Yes. In terms of travel, I think it's all but certain there will be a lot of issues on the roadways. Especially in Cedar Rapids, you have that I-380, that S-curve that goes through downtown. That's a whole elevated roadway. Those are the worst in these icing situations. It doesn't take a lot of ice to cause a lot of issues on the roadways. And so I do think Cedar Rapids will be rough tomorrow. The question is, are we talking, power outages, level bad? And I do think it's a possibility because we're talking 1/10 of an inch, maybe up to 1/4 of an inch of ice in Cedar Rapids. And when you add to that the stronger wind gust, we're talking maybe 25, 35 miles per hour, certainly going to be some problems. Chuck was asking about Waterloo. Waterloo will be slick. Let me go back to, again, the radar view. But you can see that, again, tomorrow morning, is that Waterloo should be getting in that precipitation, that purple again up towards Waterloo. That is freezing rain. There might be a little bit more maybe sleet mixing in up that way, up towards Waterloo. But it's still going to be enough to cause issues on the roadways. You will be dealing with slick roads tomorrow. And then we had Robbie was asking about Sigourney. Kind of a similar story. I mean, you're not technically in that ice storm warning. I don't believe, right? Keika County's not in that. I don't think they are. Oh, they are. My bad. I did not know they extended that far south. So yes, Sigourney is in that ice storm warning. Let me correct what I said. Sigourney is in that ice storm warning. And so, but either way, you're going to be dealing with that heavier precipitation. You can see it kind of moving in here. Again, we'll say 3, 4, 5 a.m. is when the heaviest of that precipitation will start moving in. And again, the problem is, someone was asking about the afternoon. Stephanie, 11 a.m. tomorrow afternoon. That's, again, going to be a problem because even, morning, 11 a.m. in the morning. Because this will continue. The changeover from freezing rain to just a cold rain likely will not occur until, maybe 1 to 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, it's going to take time for that changeover to happen. And that's going to be part of the issue tomorrow. We have, let's see, Colt asked about what time will it switch to rain in East Central Iowa. Again, what I kind of was just talking about, somewhere in that window of maybe 3 to 5 p.m. I think that's when things really begin to change over. It could happen earlier than that, but it's kind of a rough area. I mean, you can kind of see, again, we'll go back to the radar view. You can kind of see that, that mixing precipitation, even up towards Dubuque, I mean, that sticks around to, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's sticking around for quite a while. The good news is if you're farther northeast, so let's say up towards La Crosse, Decorah, McGregor, Dubuque, there likely will be a bit more other types maybe mixing in. So maybe a little bit of light snow, some sleet, still enough to cause, slick roads and things like that. But you might avoid the worst of the ice accumulation, that freezing rain accumulation, farther if you're right along the Mississippi River. Jan, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you. I'm also on Facebook, Meteorologist Nick Stewart, if that's your cup of tea. But thanks for following on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And again, if you're watching me on Facebook, I'm over on YouTube, Meteorologist Nick Stewart. That's where I stream a lot of the storm chasing and stuff like that. Any other questions? There was something else I was about to show, and over my head. I forgot about it already. Yeah, real quick again, here's a look at your weather alerts. Again, all of Iowa is under a winter weather alert. Oh, I was going to show sounding, so let me get to that in a second. Again, all of Iowa is under that winter weather advisory, but we also have that ice storm warning there in kind of eastern Iowa. But again, this is fairly large. I mean, it pushes up through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Nebraska, northern Missouri as well. So a pretty large area will be dealing with kind of light ice accumulation. Got some guy responding to maybe something there. That's, again, Council Bluffs that you're looking at right there. Look how much that blinds the camera. But again, the whole area is going to be dealing with some slick precipitation tomorrow. Let me go ahead and I want to show kind of what happens tomorrow. We'll do a little bit kind of, some deeper meteorology here. Well, actually, no, I keep the camera up. You can see more emergency responders here. So something may have just happened fairly close to where this camera is. We're getting a lot of emergency activity starting to show up here. I'll keep an eye on this. Let me look at the DOT in a second. But I want to show you, I'm going to pull this up, and then let me go to our 7. We'll reset this. So some emergency activity going on there. All right, let me show you this real quick. This is a forecast for, I'm going to pull a sounding over Cedar Rapids. So this is a look at the atmosphere vertically. So we're sitting over Cedar Rapids, and you're looking through the entire atmosphere tomorrow for the next several hours. Let me just show you kind of how this pans out. Can I do, does this work? If I do, it does not. Okay. So first off, we can see here there's some dry air. So the red line is temperature, the green line is dew point. Though they're kind of far apart at the current hour, and that's some dry air in place. So that's why we're not going to see more emergency vehicles. I don't know what happened there. I'm going to keep an eye on this. You can see there's that big spread between the temperature and the dew point. That's some dry air, kind of in the mid levels and lower levels of the atmosphere. What we're going to watch happen, we're going to step through time here. Notice, so we're at 2Z, we're at 3, we're at 4, we're at 5, and then here we are at around midnight. And what you'll notice here is that the red line and the green line is starting to touch here and here. So the atmosphere is starting to get more moist. It's getting more saturated. Therefore, we can start seeing that potential for precipitation to actually reach the ground. That will continue. So here we are 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So by 3 a.m., these lines are much, much tighter together, and that's when we're basically at saturation, and that's when we're going to likely start seeing some precipitation falling, likely as freezing rain. The reason why is if you look at the line, this blue line right here, that is your freezing line. So that's where, 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit. The surface temperature at this point in time, let me open this in a new tab, and let me zoom in here. Your surface temperature is at 23 degrees Fahrenheit, so obviously below freezing. However, notice the red line here crosses that blue line that's slanted like this or skewed like that. It goes above freezing. So what's happening here is you get precipitation that's developing up here, likely as snow. It reaches that warm layer, it begins to melt, and then there's pocket of cold air is so shallow it can't refreeze, so it falls as melted precipitation, hits the ground, but the ground is below freezing, and so it begins to freeze. That's your freezing rain. That's how you get freezing rain to develop, right? So here we are again, this is 3 a.m. We'll go 4. And again, I was telling you about 4 to 5 a.m. is when we really start seeing that heavier precipitation develop. Here again, as I look in Cedar Rapids, those lines are very much touching each other now. So that's a saturated column there. So that's when you're going to really start seeing this steadier precipitation fall. And again, surface temperature may be a little bit hard to read for you guys. It's 24 degrees, but above your heads, about a kilometer up, let's say maybe 3/4 of a mile to a mile above your head, that's above freezing. And so the precipitation falls as snow, hits that warmer air, melts, and then hits the ground and freezes because the ground is frozen. So that's what causes freezing rain, and that's the setup for tomorrow. Hope that all makes sense. Let's see, we got Caleb, one county from the winter weather advisory. That's good. Hopefully things aren't too bad for you tomorrow. I do want to real quick, I've kind of been rambling in my own forecast. I do also want to do my due diligence and show what the National Weather Service has to say. I think you always want to look at the people that are doing it, which pretty much matches what I was talking about. Let me resize this window. So I'm doing something on a different window right now. Just trying to make it a little bit easier so you can see all their graphics. All right. So here's the official graphics from the National Weather Service. You can kind of see they're talking upwards of 1/2 inch. Again, I don't foresee 1/2 inch being a big concern. If 1/2 inch of freezing rain does happen, that's a problem. That is really going to start talking about power outages. But again, that could occur even with 1/4 inch. But you can see, again, we're kind of talking about that pocket there in east central Iowa. That's likely going to be the worst. That perfect overlap of heavier precipitation developing while surface temperatures are still below freezing, but that pocket of warm air is aloft. Where all of that stacks up will likely be the kind of that area in east central Iowa. And again, that's where that ice storm warning is in effect. It's no coincidence, right? I do want to talk about the timing. We talked about this through the models, pretty much right in line here. 10 p.m. to midnight in east central Iowa. That's probably when we might start seeing, some quick light freezing drizzle. The heavier precipitation, though, will likely come after that, probably closer to maybe 3, 4 a.m. there. But here's your kind of rough timeline. Much of central Iowa between now and the next hour or two, we'll likely start seeing it move in, but the heavier stuff will come in the following hours. What else do they got? They got some temperature talks here. So again, this is kind of what they're showing in terms of the warm-up. You can kind of see temperatures are increasing with time. And that's when, for example, let me see, like Ottumwa, for example, below freezing, near freezing, and that shift over to above freezing. That's when we're going to see that changeover back to, from freezing rain to rain. All right, DJ Tiger, I'm remember in the middle of where they're saying quarter of an inch of ice is possible. Really not excited. Yeah, ice is not fun. I love chasing weather. I'll go out of my way to chase winter storms, blizzards, hurricanes, tornadoes. Ice storms are the one thing I do not mess with. I do not mess with ice storms. They are just not a good time. Do not love ice storms whatsoever. All right, we're going to wrap this up. I got a movie to watch with the wife. And so let's end real quick with just some look at, again, the probabilities of precipitation. I'm trying to fix this graphic so that it doesn't broken. All right, there we go. So again, looking at the probabilities, this is of at least 1/10 of an inch of ice. Again, so we're talking Marshalltown, Grinnell, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City. This could clip Des Moines as well. Newton, Williamsburg, Vinton. That's that area where we will likely see the highest probability of at least 1/10 of an inch of ice. And that's enough to really cause issues with travel. Traveling will become extremely hazardous, if not impossible, tomorrow, very early morning through the probably early afternoon as well. If we stepped it up to 1/4 of an inch, so this is really when you start talking more about power outages with 1/4 of an inch of ice. You can see the probability is around 30 to 50%. It's that doesn't sound like a lot, but relatively speaking, that's a really high number for 1/4 of an inch of ice. I mean, think of 1/4 of an inch of ice as in the hurricane sense, like a category 3 hurricane. 1/4 of an inch ice is really when you start stepping into the bigger danger zone. That's when we can start talking more about power outages and tree damage. And that does include, again, Grinnell, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, Williamsburg, down to Keokuk, Washington, Sigourney, Keokuk County, Sigourney, Washington. That area is where we will likely see the higher chances of that. So again, things are already going downhill. You can see that out towards Council Bluffs. The cameras are already starting to ice. It does not take a lot of icing to cause a lot of issues on the roadways. Please stay safe if you have to be out tomorrow. But really, again, if you're anywhere in the Midwest tomorrow, it's probably just a good idea to just stay home if you can, because it's really just not worth messing with. Your ice storm warnings, again, are in effect there for east central Iowa. Winter weather advisories extend well outside of that, including Nebraska, northern Missouri, western Illinois, western portions of Wisconsin. You can see even up towards the Dakotas as well. So a big area is going to be under the risk tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for this little winter weather update. If you like this video, make sure to like it over on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, feel free to subscribe for more videos as well. As we go deeper into winter, won't be the last time we'll be doing one of these little winter weather updates. They're always kind of fun to do. Stay safe. If you're in the winter weather area that will be affected tomorrow, please stay safe. Please stay home if you can. If you have to be out, use extreme caution. Stay safe, everybody. Stay warm. We'll see you again next time.